Hi there. So, I don't prefer a lot of front-end frameworks, mainly because I'm a back-end developer, but when it comes to the web, I prefer static pages. There are situations where I do need interactivity on the sites I work on, but normally I just reach for vanilla JS and it gets the job done. A big reason why I avoid JS is I don't like the debugging experience. For the work I do, I prefer to do most of the heavy lifting server-side, and even then I don't like server-side JS. Now I'm sure I would get used to it, or at the very least I would get over it if I used JS more, but JS is just a programming language I don't gravitate towards. I don't like some of its paradigms and design choices. Now I'm no programming elitist that thinks modern programming languages are a crime against humanity. I fall into the camp of whatever language does the thing that you want it to do is the best tool for the job. So I wanted to actually get a video out this month. So I thought, hey, why not build a thingy that does a thing using vanilla JS and then do it again in React so that maybe I can learn something and like JS a little better. And at the time I was like, wow, that's a great idea. This is going to be so much fun. And then I started writing the code. Okay, so I decided to go complete software developer tutorial mode and make a Pokédex. I want to display Pokemon data in a table on a web page and filter the results using text inputs. There will be some JS code that will filter the table while I type, and the table can be filtered by each input field. First, I'll write the front end using only vanilla, and then I'll rewrite it using React. Now, the purpose of this video is to explore JavaScript as a front end, but I did decide to make my own back end for this project. Now, even though TypeScript is an option, as I've said before, I just don't like using JavaScript as a back end language. It's just not my thing. So, for this project, I will be building a simple server using Flask, a Python web framework. Now, before you start laughing at me for using Python, don't. All you need to know is that the Flask server is an API that has endpoints that will provide data to the front end. I will manipulate that data in JS to display it the way I want so that it looks cool and nice, and you, the viewer, will be impressed as long as you don't look at the code. Okay, real quick, I just wanted to show how the server will work. We'll start the Flask server, and then I'll load in a bunch of Pokemon JSON data, and all of that data is just being stored in memory with a dictionary. I'm not doing any reading or writing or anything like that, just to keep it simple. So yeah, let's run this thing. So, oh, it's main.py. Okay, so there we go, server started, and we gotta do programming React, and then server. Alright, and then this will actually load the data. I got just this file called load.py in a folder called utility, and now we're adding some JSON. Now if we want to read our data from the server, we can use curl http localhost 5000, and the gen1 endpoint will show us all gen1 Pokemon. What happened? Missing URL, bad or illegal? Oh, so you can't forget the backslashes. And there we go. For my sanity, and so that my watch time does not fall off the face of the planet, I'm going to keep things brief. I will show you the most important parts, and you can pause and read the code if you need to. For this video, I'm going to make the assumption that you, the viewer, know how some of these things work. Linked in the description will be a detailed explanation for everything if you are a beginner and have no idea what I'm talking about. First, I have to get the data from my app, and I did so like this. Data is the JSON data from fetch data, so I pass data into this function. The Pokemon types is a list of types because Pokemon can have more than one type. I want to display each type as a string and separate it by comma. I accomplish this like so. Now I need to grab the user inputs from each input to filter the data. To do this in real time, I created a listener for each input like so. It calls filter table, which looks like this. I call the function fetch data and filter in index.js like so. And it works. Okay, cool. Now time for React. So I'm going to build a hook called use Pokemon data, which I will be able to use in my React code. What's a hook? Don't worry about it. I did so like this. Use Pokemon data will return properties Pokemon, error, and handle input for the data table component. Handle inputs will take two arguments, position and input. There is a state called filter that will keep track of the user's filters. To set the filter, I set previous as a pointer function. I will declare a list new filters, which will be a copy of the previous list. This will be used to keep track of all the filters. I then build a JSON object using the position and input, and then I insert it into the new filters list using the position. I then return new filters. So once we have our filter state, we can filter our Pokemon list. The main idea here is that filter Pokemon will start out as a copy of all Pokemon. For each filter stored in the filter state, which is a list of JSON objects consisting of position and input, I will iterate through filter Pokemon using the filter method. I will check if the ID, the weight, or the height is equal to the input value. Else, I check if the user input is a substring of its respective column value. If true is returned, then it gets added to the filtered Pokemon list. Finally, I set the Pokemon state. If the user doesn't provide any filters or all of the filters are removed, then all Pokemon is set to the Pokemon state. Now that I have a hook that handles all of my data, I can render the data as JSX in a component. Remember handle types? It works the same as the vanilla version. Now let's look at the display table function. This function takes Pokemon and error as properties. Notice how in React, I can return HTML that I can map my JSON objects to. This is far better than interpolating my data to a string that I'll use as HTML like I did in the vanilla version. Next, let's look at the rest of the data table component. This is where handle inputs is called. The target.value is the string the user enters into the input field. Index is the input field the user is currently using. OnChange is used to listen for changes to call the function to save myself some typing. I added each choice in a list called choices, which represents each filterable column. I then mapped each choice to an input field in a column by index. In hindsight, did I have to do it this way? No, I probably could have just used a loop or something, but oh well. Finally, I used the data table component and pass it into properties. And now I can place the data table component in app.js. And it works. For this specific use case, and for most of my use cases, I think I prefer vanilla. Now, that does not mean that vanilla is better. It always just depends. If you were building single-page applications, like some kind of dashboard, React would come in handy. If you can manage to stay out of use state hell, I think hooks are great and are very helpful. I also really like components. It makes using HTML easier and less time-consuming. It's a big reason why I also like a framework called Astro.js. However, vanilla is sometimes just simpler and less time-consuming to set up. Big React apps can be slow to load, which is not an issue exclusive to React, and they can also be over-engineered given what the app is designed to do. For example, if you're making a to-do app, do you really need React? I don't think every website needs to use a framework, and I don't think all web apps need super complicated JS frameworks. There's elegance and simplicity in a static page with a little bit of vanilla JavaScript for necessary interactivity. Could I have written some of this code better? Perhaps.